What else is on?
Coming to you now from some guy's laptop.
The Frankie Show! Everyone, the Frankie Show!
It's the Frankie Show.
This is a suburb. Well, they can be hard to define. You know it when you see it. Suburbia has some key features, like its awesome uniformity and unique sense of isolation. Down there, you can be sure you won't find any diversities in incomes or lifestyle. Suburbia, as you could guess, is where the majority of people want to live. Oh, wait a second. That's the city, sorry, and we're in New York City, the blueprint to the American city. Well, despite its war on poverty, increased cost of living, and massive gentrification. Well, actually, those are all American certified. Whew, I had to get out of Times Square and come back to the nice, quiet burbs. Suburbia represents the American dream. While the infrastructure needed to support the sprawl of houses is kinda ugly and hella dangerous. You have things like a street with its low speed limits, making it comfortable to walk along and great for both businesses and homes alike. Now, streets are one thing, but you also have things like a highway, which is meant to transfer people from the burbs to the cities at dangerously high speeds. How's that working out for you, suburbia? And the burbs have discovered the worst of both worlds. A stroll that's just god-awful. It tries to be a highway and a street at the same time, and it's, I gotta get out of here. I get it. We all know suburbia is hella boring and hella bad for the environment. But why has America invested so much in suburbia, subsequently building an entire country dependent on the automobile, while other countries have invested in high-speed rails and, catch this, walkable cities? Now, if you love the burbs, ask yourself, why are the cities people fled for suburbia now being gentrified? People are slowly realizing they want more than suburbia has to offer, yet suburbia is what they stuck us with. To understand why America clings on to suburbia, we need to understand why suburbia exists, which, I promise, is actually pretty riveting. I would not have made this movie otherwise. And with that being said, I hope you enjoy the show. This is an ad from General Motor Companies, or GMC. Everyday conqueror just by owning an SUV. This is from an ABC's of Good Things About Petroleum advertisement for Shell. M is for mother, who with her little helper oil can do all the cooking and cleaning she's supposed to do, but faster. And this is a picture taken by Margaret Burke White in Louisville, Kentucky, after the Ohio flood of 1937. It depicts black people waiting in line for food assistance, contrasted by a heteronormative, typical white suburban family cheesing in the background. There's no way like the American way. You know just as well as I do how easy it is to point out the hypocrisy in American liberalism. Liberty and justice for all. Unless black, indigenous, Asian, Arab, Latinx, a woman, gay, trans, a broke boy with no land, and especially if you're black. Blackity black joy ain't allowed in this country. What's interesting here is how the defining pillars of the American way of life have led us to this car-dependent sprawl. Reagan is typically blamed for the death of American cities, having cut federal funding for them, forcing them to shuck and jive for billionaires with a god complex.
The world may know Detroit as Motown, but some believe it could easily be renamed.
A lot of people believe it should be called Gilbertown.
Oh, no, that one we don't want to have a call, but you know what?
One man who decided to cosplay Batman in real life, except he's Bruce Wayne all the time.
And they feel safe because cameras, thanks to Gilbert, keep crime in check.
Not that Batman's any better. And the expansion for car-dependent sprawl is laid at the feet of corporations, oil and car manufacturers, many pointing to the General Motors conspiracy as the inciting incident for car-dependent sprawl, despite the fact that streetcar ridership was already on the decline when they ripped out the rails. While these interpretations aren't wrong, as Reagan is the devil and corporations are killing our planet for profit, they're not the full story. You click to hear me talk about suburbia and how this urban sprawl is killing our planet. The thing is, that's too easy. Anyone from a suburb knows they're dreadful. Other than drugs, trips to the local mall, and board games, there's not much left to do. And I've been banned from Thanksgiving for talking about how monopoly is capitalist propaganda normalizing the commodification of housing to children. But can you blame me? It's interesting how something like board games can turn moral no-nos into just normal aspects of everyday life. Weird dinner conversation, but this is who I am. Settlers of Catan kind of made colonialism a fun family game night activity, and who knew?
The game of life would literally represent life. You remember experiencing the 2D world from only your car? College, work, raising a family, all from the driver's seat of those sweet, sweet cruisers. Except I actually lost those cruisers and had to replace them with the pins from Sorry, but I think that's like the perfect metaphor for life, actually. Sorry, car dependency, a climate-killing shit show, but at least you can play Chance the Rapper as loud as you want on the way to work.
Jumping out the grease.
Well, car dependency is a byproduct of suburbia, and in order to sell suburbia, or what is essentially the American way of life, or what Matthew T. Herbert called entrepreneurial life, the nation had to dream it first. And why does any of this matter? Because your environment is everything, and I want to examine how your environment molds you. Why is the city full of artists and hustlers, and suburbia is filled with dads? White, sweaty dads. Look, I'm not here to kink shame, I'm just here to ask questions. Also, urban design is linked to overall happiness, as Charles Montgomery explored in his book, Happy City. Who knew that SimCity was teaching us that boring shit is fun sometimes, and important always? In this video, I'm interested in exploring how post-war suburbia, despite its obvious faults, was a necessary and almost predictable manifestation of capitalism, as well as how the failed suburban experiment is not only killing our cities, but also your creativity. Like, straight up, suburbanites are lame. They're now infiltrating cities in search of a personality, but instead stripping cities of their cultural significance. But is it really their fault or a byproduct of the commodification of housing? Part 1. The American way of life. Where does common sense, the ideals and moral framework regarded by the majority as normal, come from? Why is every main character in a pop culture staple like Friends, a show exploring the lives of a string of characters in New York City, the most diverse place in America, all white and straight? Why is a black Doctor Who radical, or better yet, why is a black actress playing a black character somehow inflammatory and met with outrage?
And for the record, I'm still pissed that Rue is black. Like, you think she might have mentioned that? Is that just me, or how in the world are they going to make Rue a freaking black bitch in the movie? LOL, not to be racist, but I'm angry now. Awkward moment when Rue is some black girl and not the little blonde innocent girl you picture.
Through something Antonio Gramsci, a political revolutionary, fascists feared so much they locked him away for 11 years until he met his demise, called cultural hegemony. The basic premise being that people aren't ruled only through the threat of violence, but also through ideas. A process of ideological leadership where underprivileged classes consent to their own exploitation by the ruling class instead of being forced. The ruling class manufactures the consent of the majority by instilling their worldview as the norm. This happens in civil society through media, both mainstream and independent, the news delivering Red Scare propaganda, cartoons centered around a heteronormative nuclear family, even YouTube creators reinforcing philanthrocapitalism and humanizing corporations all have a hand in solidifying cultural norms. And it's insidious because they might not even know they're doing it. Watching Ryan delivering a penny to Mr. Beast was fun, but he was kinda just selling his body to the rich to raise money for food.
Paul Dotz, the current top donor of the fundraiser, he just contacted me and said, "You free if I call or video call?" So I'm about to video call Paul Dotz. Paul.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, how are you doing, Paul?
I'm good, thank you very much for asking. Now, there is another one coming.
There's another one coming?
Yeah, it's 100,000.
Why is this necessary? It happens other places as well, like work and school, etc. Then there's the state to punish those who don't conform, and the state and civil society come together to form a symbiotic relationship leading society. But what if we take this one step further? Not only are people influenced to support systems that actively go against their own self-interest through the ideologies instilled by the ruling class, but also through the basic infrastructure of everyday life. Bro, I swear to, I feel like you can hear this lawnmower right now, straight up.
Sorry, I'm making 20 bucks a lawn out here. Look, I realize some people love the idea of a single family home. People like privacy and a place of their own. I get that. I'm only saying that suburbs don't need to be car dependent and made up of only single family homes. The facts are the planet is warming dramatically because of humans and our burning of fossil fuels at outrageous rates. The population is increasing and people are being priced out of their communities, meaning we need more housing. preferably affordable. More than 500,000 people are homeless as it stands, and that's bad. That's objectively a bad thing, even when you look at it through a capitalist perspective. People without stable housing are less likely to hold down a job and produce economic value in our society. Weird that we had to go there, but it's true. Countries and cities with housing first programs in place are showing real promise at actually solving homelessness. And with an estimated 3.7 million Americans who are facing housing insecurity, affordable housing is a must. People being able to afford a place to live is important. That's right, I'm a radical. Why is single family zoning the norm? Why are American cities car dependent? And why are people being priced out of the communities? Watch and find out. I got a lawn to get back to mowing, bread to make.
You see, suburbia is oil dependent, the world is, but suburbia is awful. Not only is it car dependent, but has bigger lawns to water, larger homes to heat, which is one thing in LA, but in New England, man, as well as just taking up a lot of space. Single-family homes for miles, resulting in high carbon consumption communities with everyone driving cars everywhere and using gasoline lawnmowers. Today's oil dependency is energy dependency, and life has always been dependent on said energy. This is food and drink and my black Americano because I'm refined through a complex process of self-hatred. Humanity's need for energy has always shaped civilizations, the way communities and cultures have formed. Until around 12,000 years ago, humanity met this basic need for energy through a hunter-gatherer culture. And yes, I do this all the way back to the dawn of humanity. The only energy humanity had to obtain the necessities of life was manual labor, i.e. hunting and gathering. Geographically speaking, this meant this era of humans were nomadic as they used mobility to survive as they had to move with and to their food. Then came the Neolithic period where humans began to discover the wonders of agriculture. We began investing energy into the soil, resulting in more food from crops than was possible from foraging. Essentially the plot of Minecraft, IRL. This dependable food source led communities to become permanent and larger as more food supported higher populations. Humanity and their spatial relations to the earth changed thanks to their ability to harness energy, domesticated animals' labor as well as their own labor, and invest that energy into the soil, resulting in a more reliable food source. This led to massive social and technological shifts as civilizations were born and economies and all that fucking dope shit. Access to energy is essential for rapid growing societies. Energy is our lifeblood. A relatively modern example of this would be America and the discovery that gasoline was actually useful for powering the automobile instead of just making rivers extra slippery.
An undesired product, considered dangerous and unusable, was discarded in great quantities. The product was gasoline.
You serious?
The recognition of oil as an economical and easily handled liquid source of power was the springboard for a new era of magnificent progress.
Henry Ford also brought the assembly line into his factories, bringing down labor costs and increasing production, making cars cheaper, meaning more people could access the good life. The fun thing about the automobile is it made individualized travel over vast spaces possible. It made post-war suburbia possible.
This, hardly any buses, absolutely no trolleys, nothing in real walking distance, just roads for cars.
In 1929, the Great Depression started. People lost their jobs. No jobs meant no money meant no food, no housing, no shit, no nothing. Money is everything, and there was no way to make it. And even if you could, you couldn't do shit with it. Deflation, motherfuckers! Make $1 today, it'll be worth 25 cents tomorrow. The free market was just too free. Government, please, save it. Herbert Hoover, one of the many white dudes you don't remember, really didn't do that much. And then FDR comes along and he does more, which is good. But is it actually? Not in a let material conditions become so bad revolution is unavoidable type of way, but in a the Great Depression had America on the verge of class consciousness type of way. One of America's most popular presidents, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, saved capitalism, and he did jack shit for black people. He also put Japanese people in internment camps. I'm honestly just waiting for Lin-Manuel Miranda to make him a black rap god at this point. These roads that I paved, yeah, I will behave as long as I can make everyone else my slave. The left was on the rise, with the public distrusting the promises of the right to life and liberty promised under capitalism. So much so, in 1934, the New York Times dropped a banger article, Life in It Yet, starting with capitalism is doomed, dead, or dying. Of course, it calls for the capitalists to grow a conscience to save the nation, saying, one thing is sure, if capitalism is to be saved, it must be saved by the capitalists themselves. In their hands lies the ultimate fates of the whole system. The billionaires will not save us. For the love of God, Tesla is not the cure for climate change. We never learned, but it's interesting that in 1934, things got so bad that the New York Times was calling for us to at least rethink capitalism. The thing about FDR is he realized this fact too. He saw that the market wasn't going to recorrect itself, and he also saw the anti-capitalist movement gaining traction. Now, someone definitely could argue that FDR is one of the better presidents to ever ran this country, to have solidified actual upward mobility for some in the working class during the bulk of World War II. I mean, impressive. I might actually watch Lin-Manuel Miranda make him rhyme miracle, spiritual, capitalism, low-key, biblical. Yeah, we're coming out here taking on the spiritual. That being said, he did put Japanese people into internment camps. He did reinforce and uphold segregation. He did bring the left further right in his mission to save capitalism. So, and what role did World War II play in revitalizing the economy and solidifying American nationalism? A fucking big one. But again, all of this is beyond the scope of this video. The important takeaway is the faults to be found in FDR are inherent to liberalism and capital accumulation. You know, like the racism and sexism, you know, the exclusionary aspects to New Deal capitalism. I hate when my moral character is called into question by the cashier at Goodwill asking me if I want to round up to feed the hungry. Like, girl, I'm shopping at Goodwill. I am the hungry. But at the end of the day, they're the messenger. I don't think that works, actually. We're talking about the President of the United States of America, the leader of the free world. Not some 17-year-old discovering the realities of wage labor. But whatever, I'm not here to argue about whether or not FDR was one of the worst men to run this country, and that's just beyond the scope of this video. As early as 1917, the government was pushing people to own their own homes. The Department of Labor handed out booklets like these. This particular image is quite revealing. The man who owns his own home is a better worker, husband, father, citizen, and a real American. As Richard Rothstein pointed out in Color of Law, government officials during the Wilson administration thought Americans with property would be more invested in the capitalist system. I'll also point out that looking at these depictions of the ideal American life, we can see only the heteronormative, white, nuclear family. I pulled these from the journal article about gender and family relations in state housing practices, by the way, which I'll include in the bibliography. Let's fast forward to 1926 and look at the Guidebook for Better Homes campaign. Herbert Hoover stated in the foreword, "It is in our homes and family circles that the children of each generation receive the most essential part of the training they need as men and women to go forth and meet the problems that press upon them." Hoover seems well aware of the idea that homes are where proper patriotic Americans are bred. In the second stated purpose for the campaign, it reads, "It is strongly felt that the happiest and most wholesome home life is possible for a family with growing children only in a detached single-family house." Something else I found particularly interesting, in the seventh purpose, it pretty much says the main reason for women to attend school is to learn how to manage a household. And don't worry, none of this was directed toward black people or immigrants. It was just the norm back then that when the government was addressing Americans, they obviously weren't talking about them. With reason 10 for why your community should participate being, there may be in your community a large population of immigrants or of Negroes who, because of limited education, have not yet learned the ways of securing the best living conditions which are within their reach. I bring this up mainly to show that long before the post-war suburban boom, the government was well aware that controlling a community's environment was one of the best ways to mold them. It just so happened the detached single-family house was conveniently the one that made women the unpaid housekeepers, families happier, more patriotic, and committed to the economic model which would fail them. Also, Negroes and immigrants were too uneducated to access them without guidance from the good white folk. That was my attempt at sarcasm, by the way. But moving on. The suburbs were always meant to be exclusionary and to reinforce the patriarchy and white supremacy central to American liberalism. The thing is, no one took real action to creating the conditions necessary for the middle class to acquire private property. Not until FDR. During his presidency, the HOLC was created to help white people who already owned homes keep them, along with the FHA to help white people afford homes. I say white people because Franklin Delano Roosevelt did not care about black people.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
FDR did have a deep understanding of capitalism and how to address the concerns of the growing leftists. Either that, or he was just vibing off a different kind of tobacco.
Boys, hear me out on something, alright? And it's gonna sound a little crazy, it's gonna sound a little out of pocket, but hear me out. I ain't even gonna hold you, bro. You secured that presidency straight up. What you think about? 3 terms? Nah, fam. What if In order to save capitalism, we secure higher wages for working class Americans.
You wildin' with that one. You wildin'. With the what?
And we give them private property in the butt fuck of nowhere. Hey,
I've been done told y'all that he shouldn't have taken that brownie.
And all of this is made possible thanks to Henry Ford making cars cheap as shit. So now they can like travel long ass distances, and they want to too. It's crazy. And this the kicker here. This the kicker. We put them in debt for 30 years to the banks.
Yo, that's not even that crazy. They've been doing that with cars.
Yeah, you know that one hit.
That did hit. That did hit. You right.
Come on, don't play with me. I'm FDR. FDR.
Let's get serious real quick. I realize I'm framing FDR as, well, an asshole. I personally think we should be hypercritical of our leaders. Now, I should say FDR wasn't clairvoyant, and he was definitely not a major capitalist. Also, FDR didn't have complete and utter power. He had to balance the left and the right, work with the Supreme Courts, and then got pulled into a war. He also did marginally more in the way of empowering black people than presidents before him. That being said, the reforms meant to heal the Depression were bound to have positive economic effects even on marginalized communities, and most of the progressive work done as far as race relations can be attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, who was pretty based. Instead of looking at his rhetoric, which very much brought in support from the far left, or casting moral judgments, let's focus on agencies born from New Deal reforms. The New Deal very much intended to uphold capitalism and introduced many agencies that provided security and leveled out the market. Agencies the market depends on to function today. I'm not saying this was good nor bad, but I am saying it was crucial to sustaining and ensuring the survival of capitalism. Those agencies include the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, June 16, 1933, which insured banks, the Securities and Exchange Commission, June 6, 1934, with three main purposes stated as protecting investors, facilitating capital formation, and maintaining fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and the Federal Housing Administration, which provides mortgage insurance on loans made by FHA-approved lenders nationwide. Homes used to be even harder to buy than they are today. Before FDR, it was typical for people buying homes to pull out short-term balloon loans, typically putting 50% down, paying interest-heavy payments with 5 years to pay it off, leaving those with a remaining balance to refinance or find another bank offering another balloon loan. So yeah, only people with cash could do this. That also meant that being able to afford your own home was a sign that you were well-to-do, upper class. Got the bag, secured if you will. The two programs I mentioned earlier created during the New Deal, the Homeowners Loan Association, HOLC, in 1933, and the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, in 1934, were pretty instrumental in shaping America. What the HOLC did was buy up existing mortgages about to foreclose and then issued new mortgages with longer repayment schedules, and the mortgages were amortized, meaning people were paying off some principal as well as interest every month. People paid to own, not just paid to pay. Of course, the HOLC wasn't just handing out free money. Borrowers had to make regular payments. To determine who was likely to avoid defaulting, the HOLC took into account the condition of the house, the condition of the rest of the neighborhood, favorable influences, near Prospect Park, substantial row brick construction, close in, good transportation facilities, as well as the racial makeup of said neighborhood. Detrimental influences, slow infiltration of Negroes from the section to the north. The HOLC created maps like this one. Whoa! That's redlining right there. What the fuck, Franklin? The green being first grade, the best, blue second, yellow third, and red fourth, the worst of them all. If black people were living in an area, boom, instant red, like that episode of The Button.
Nice to meet you.
You too. You too.
Instant! While the HOLC did still help homeowners in red zones, it set a racial precedent that black people, just for being black, were higher risk borrowers. A racial precedent that the FHA couldn't wait to remix. The Federal Housing Administration appraisal standards included a whites only requirement. I know, America was racist all along. Who would have thunk? The broader point is property ownership is constantly regarded as a vehicle for wealth accumulation, something that can hold its value and ride the waves of inflation, and it can even be turned into a cash flowing asset too. Yeah, your landlord knows all about that one. This access to federal backed money that helped lift the middle class and provide them with an asset that generally appreciates in value was denied black people and other racial minorities. So who's the real welfare queen, Reagan? Who?
Chicago, they found a woman who holds the record. She used 80 names, 30 addresses.
A lot of suburbia was built with FHA and VA subsidies. Richard Rothstein noted in Color of Law,
by the 1950s, the FHA and VA together were insuring half of all new mortgages nationwide. The FHA had its biggest impact on segregation, not in its discriminatory evaluations of individual mortgage applicants, but in its financing of entire subdivisions, in many cases entire suburbs, as racially exclusive white enclaves.
Examples of white-only suburbs subsidized by the state: Levittown, New York; Westlake, California; Lakewood, California; Oak Forest, Texas, and more. A land removed from black people is central to the American way of life, and that's history baked right into suburbia. Suburbia represents privatization, consumerism, and segregation. Walk through a suburb you've never been to and tell me those vibes aren't off. And you know it's even worse when you do it while black. Despite the federal funding making these suburbs possible, they still represented the prosperity of life under capitalism, with Bill Levitt stating, "No man who owns his own home and lot can be a communist. He has too much to do."
Far as we're talking about the government subsidizing shit, let's talk about some roads. God awful.
Part 2. Roads. Remember the veins stemming from suburbia plowing through cities and nature and everything good and holy in this world? The New Deal provided $4 billion of federal funding for them between 1932 and 1942. Oh damn, I actually got that first try. I can hear Black FDR now. I stand by my roads, this path that I chose, gatekeeping suburbia for me and my bros. Drop the beat. I will never let Lin-Manuel Miranda live that shit down. This led to the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, which funded the interstate highway. Instead of trains, streetcars, dense housing, reparations, this is where federal money was going. And yet... Sorry to interrupt, but there's actually more to that Highway Act.
Passed into law by President Eisenhower, it devoted $26 billion to construct a 41,000-mile network of interstate highways that would spread across the country and connect the United States. The highways are there now, all around the United States. You can drive on them today. Well, great for corporations like automobile manufacturers and oil barons. The government and the racist white folk at the time had their own agendas when it came to the countrywide highway construction. Deborah Archer noted in her essay, "White Men's Roads Through Black Men's Homes, Advancing Racial Equity Through Highway Reconstruction."
By the time the interstate highway system was completed in the early 1970s, it had fundamentally restructured urban America. In almost every region of the country, the new interstate highway system uprooted, displaced, and isolated hundreds of thousands of people. The United States Department of Transportation estimates that more than 475,000 households and more than 1 million people were displaced nationwide as a direct result of federal highway building. Millions of additional people were left living in hollowed-out communities after the bulldozers left. The neighborhoods destroyed and families displaced were overwhelmingly black and poor. This was by design.
These highways were used to destroy and isolate black and brown communities, like the I-95 that connects Miami to Maine, that ran right through Miami's black neighborhood Overtown. In Birmingham, Alabama, 1957, where Interstate 59 was built along 11th Avenue with a path that mirrors the racial zoning border that was included in the old racial zoning ordinance, struck down in 1950 by the Federal Appeals Court. Interestingly enough, Interstate 59 created a barrier between College Hills, a white neighborhood, and the black communities nearby. The highway was the perfect workaround the law, not just for the mayor of Birmingham, James Morgan, but for the white people in the community that were begging city commissioners to keep the blacks out. And don't worry, if the government needed land that was privately owned in the construction of these highways, they could just enact a process known as eminent domain, which is pretty much them taking control of your property. Of course, they need to offer you what the market rate is, but the market without any competition doesn't sound very free market to me. But don't worry, the government taking control of private land
and doing whatever they want with it, and then displacing people in the process is fine, as long as it's done by America and the people affected aren't white. Oh my God. My point is, the reason America looks the way it looks today goes beyond FDR. It's not just one man, nor a handful of men, and it's bigger than corporations chasing a bag. There's an ideology at play that goes deeper than a thirst for profit. But alas, back to the show. And yes, during all of this,
corporations were running propaganda. Lying to the public to get them to buy shit is what they do best. It's to be expected, please. Like General Motors in the 1939 Futurama exhibit.
And the bangingest exhibit was GM's Futurama, a 16-minute immersive diorama/ride showcasing the future according to General Motors,
which Climate Town already talked about. There was also a film General Motors put out called To New Horizons.
New horizons. In a restless search for new opportunities and new ways of living, the mystery and the promise of distant horizons always have called men forward.
Sounds a lot like colonialism to me.
Some far distant view, with its promise of the unseen and its promise of the unknown, has forever fathered the impulse to seek for new things in new places. New horizons. Roads for men to go places.
Sounds a lot like colonialism to me.
Here is a highway intersection. Highway engineering at its most spectacular. Traffic may move safely and easily without loss of speed.
Yeah, I might have to call cap on that one.
Industrial communities have gone ahead by multiplying the conveniences and comforts of living. Hundreds of comfortable homes for workers. All people benefited by broadening their scope of living, gaining by advanced means of communication and new methods of work.
The car was portrayed as the key to the future. Cue Back to the Future reference. It was made synonymous with human achievement and luxury, as well as making you badass. Jimmy, the everyday conqueror, because he drives a sedan. He drives a sedan. He probably has a massive... It has become a reflection of our values and our social status. Minivans are for parents or people you should not invite over. Sports cars are for rich people or people who want to go vroom vroom really, really fast. Trucks are for hard-working middle-class America. Fellows who know their way around a hammer.
Hammer time.
In America's culture, products, things, material things people sold you for profit are how we express who we are. Cars are a big part of that. You know who showed up to work based on the cars parked behind the IHOP you serve at? And you know who's chill based off the many bumper stickers they slapped on their car during high school. First time driver. Keep calm and carry on. It's an accessory. An extension of who you are. Shops at LL Bean, loves nature, except doesn't care at all for the environment, and rock climbs. Car you're thinking of. Yup, the Subaru. 20 years old, loves to race in their free time, and also has hella mods on their car. What car are you thinking of? Yeah, also, Subaru. Maybe I'm just a Subaru guy. It's easy to look at modern America and see the endless sprawl and massive need for cars and conclude that car companies led us here. Which is partly true, I guess. But true is like a pizza, you need all of it, not just the sauce. And hell, this video isn't even the dough. It's probably like the pineapples you put on top just for a little extra flair. But you can take it or leave it. America needed to reinvent capitalism, change its look, slap it in a new pair of heels and let it strut its stuff, especially after it fell on its ass during the Great Depression. In front of everybody too. How embarrassing, oh my god, it couldn't be me. Workers weren't making enough to afford the goods being made. Hell, they weren't making enough to afford the basic necessities of life. The wealth inequality was dramatic and upward mobility was non-existent. It got so bad, the white folks were feeling it. And that's when shit gets serious. The New Deal ushered in a wave of change and restructured the government's role in ensuring the conditions needed for a prosperous life. Government spending during the New Deal helped shape the America we live in today, which is great. The issue is what they decided to prioritize. We could have had high-speed rails, fam. We could have had dense housing, bruh. FDR fumbled the bag. One of the biggest changes New Deal capitalism brought was realistic accessibility to private home ownership through suburbia. Private home ownership brought people deeper into capitalism and gave them something to lose, or fear losing. A stake in the system, medium rare, juicy, and plowed right through the vampire's heart. The automobile just happened to fit the bill perfectly for making said suburbia possible, allowing people to traverse huge chunks of land through their private consumer product. The car and suburbia were a perfect match, re-energizing the public's faith in the nation as well as reinforcing and feeding all of America's values. Individual freedom, the want to explore new frontiers, portray wealth and status above peers, the heteronormative nuclear family, the patriarchy, and white supremacy disorder. Not to mention, all of this was really made possible through cheap oil, and all of you living in suburbia right now paying more than $5 a gallon, really feeling the cost of the American dream, huh? You poor posh bastards. As Matthew T. Herber would put it, oil is suburbia's lifeblood. FDR, well seen as a wildly progressive president now, was the man who saved capitalism when it fell on its ass. And to be fair, did start a wave of reform that in an alternate universe might have led to something other than bank bailouts and stagnant wages for working class Americans, but I'm not Rick and this ain't Morty. We've seen what supplying suburbia its fix has led to around the globe. Massive conflicts, and the loss of life of innocence throughout the world. White flight, disinvestment in cities, as well as a rise of anti-urbanism helped fuel the spill of people into its perfectly trimmed corners. Now, with the city becoming more glamorized and people increasingly dissatisfied with suburbia, we're seeing a relatively new phenomenon. Cities all around America are experiencing an economic revival of sorts. Gentrification. Are you tired of being in the boring suburbs? Maybe you want to be able to walk to work or interact with more than the 10 families on your block. The city has whatever you're looking for. Discovered in 2022, New York and cities like it are actually pretty cool. Don't worry about the people who already live there. We'll just price them out. Come to the city and, oh my god, is that whiteface? Cut the broadcast. We would like to apologize to our viewers watching at home. We just can't believe it. A black guy in white face. Can you cover the lens? Thanks.
We're in New York City, and this is what the city might have looked like before colonizers landed and ruptured the first people's way of life. Look, I love the city, and things do change over time, but that decision and the subsequent wealth generated from it was stripped from those who called this place home for centuries. And it is loud. Oh my god, I hope you can hear me okay. I'm putting a lot of faith on this mic right here. In an increasingly gentrified city, the fixation on conquest and discovery central to the American way of life begins to feel reminiscent of the colonialism and genocide that this country was founded on. And not to mention, Columbus was sus, and this was his girlfriend, allegedly. If you say allegedly, you can say pretty much anything you want. So, yeah. Cut.
New York City is fascinating. Coined as the cultural capital of the world, it sparked cultural revolutions like the Harlem Renaissance.
Hello, Dolly. This is Louis Dolly.
And the first Pride. And the Bronx gave life to hip-hop.
One night, I'm waiting for the record to play out. Gonna have a couple more records that's got the same breakup in it. I wonder how would it be if I put them all together.
The city's now and has been experiencing massive gentrification. Surprisingly, the Google definition is pretty spot on. The process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing, and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. It's easy to view the process of gentrification as a good thing for a city's long-term quality of life. New parks, cleaner neighborhoods, more money for public schools, and safer environments. The problem is, all these benefits are only enjoyed by new residents that can afford the rising costs associated with the luxuries, while those from gentrifying places are displaced in the process. because safe and healthy cities aren't in the federal budget like suburbia is. One thing suburbia and the city do have in common is the car.
Wow, oh my god, I hope you can...
As reported in 2018, 32.2% of New York State drivers, approximately 3.9 million out of the 12 million drivers in New York State, live in the city. New York City makes up 43% of the entire state population, making it the densest city in the entire state, and still, it makes up only 32.2% of total drivers.
This is thanks to walkability, a term used to describe how efficiently people can get around without a car. Whoops. This is public transit. In New York City, we're mostly talking about the subway system and dense mixed-use neighborhoods, which is a fancy way of describing a collection of streets used for both business and residential purposes. A bodega next to a restaurant topped with apartments. And this makes walking not only realistic, but preferable. For those living in the city, a car quickly becomes a hindrance instead of a necessary part of accessing the freedom promised by the state. And isn't this crazy? Filming this, we found a street that has been closed down for pedestrian use. I mean, isn't this just awesome? Before I go on and on about all the benefits of walkability, this is the alternative to a walkable city. While New York is dense and realistically navigable without a car, shopping centers like these, which are staples in suburbia as the home is separated from literally everything else, serve to not only prioritize the car, but antagonize pedestrians. The car is like Becky with the good hair, and the pedestrian is like Beyonce. They just don't mix. But right now, Jay-Z, or the city, has both. As it stands, Becky with the good hair, or the car, is being prioritized by the city. And this creates a hostile and deadly environment for everybody else. Look at this graph of pedestrian fatalities. The kicker is, looking at this parking lot, all of this space is going to waste as it sits mostly empty all of the time. Between that stroad with its multi-lanes moving cars as fast as 50 miles per hour and the sea of asphalt between each and every business makes walking inaccessible and left to those who either can't afford a car or are unable to use one. And that's it, y'all. That's all I got. Let's go back to suburbia. I mean, New York. It's awesome. Only in the city, I swear. This is measuring walkability is a pretty great way of measuring accessibility. And while cities do need to do a better job of designing a city for people with disabilities as a priority instead of as an afterthought, we should still recognize the benefits of a walkable city. The benefits of a walkable city are extensive. From health, both mentally and physically, as walking is shown to increase mood and lower risk for heart disease. Economically, for individuals, walking lowers travel expenses with minimal to no vehicle maintenance and is better for businesses too. More foot traffic equals more customers, as well as being crucial to cultivating communities. I mean, just look at this street. This doesn't happen in suburbia. Oh my god. Walkable cities are also better for the planet as they lower the extent every individual in them is oil dependent. In the wake of unprecedented housing shortages and batshit crazy rent prices displacing thousands of people to the fringes of the city, walkability is just one piece to the puzzle of understanding why so many people are flooding towards the cities. From Portland, Oregon to Burlington, Vermont to, yes, New York City, almost everyone wants to be able to walk and enjoy the benefits of living in a multicultural, vibrant, dense city. The catch-22 being, housing is a commodity, meaning the convenience of the city goes to the highest bidder, leaving whoever can't pay on the search for housing. Well, this squeeze is being felt all throughout the country, from New Orleans to San Francisco. No other city quite captures the essence of America's rugged neoliberalism like New York City does today. The wealth inequality has become so vivid, people living on the streets while apartments in the Upper East Side are vacant for the majority of the year. As you might have guessed it, I am not a native New Yorker. I've never killed a cockroach with my bare hands.
No, you're not a real New Yorker until you've killed a cockroach with your bare hand.
I've never stolen a taxi from someone who needed it more.
I'd say you're not a real New Yorker until you've stolen a cab from someone who needs it more than you do.
And I haven't even been to all 5 boroughs. But to be fair, what reason would I have to go to Staten Island? But what I do know, for all the reasons that New York City is unique, its walkability, its culture, its community, its vibrant nightlife, are all of the reasons it's becoming unaffordable for those who call the city home. Manhattan has been thoroughly gentrified, affordable housing is quickly fading into distant memory, and public spaces are becoming privatized. Those searching for the authentic experience the city has to offer are now trying to find it in the boroughs nearby. So we're going to Brooklyn.
Stop! Now, that is information I can't handle.
I know. I can't move to Brooklyn. Even cabs won't go there.
It's interesting that Brooklyn has transcended its image of being the low-tier Manhattan as now becoming the it part to be of the city. The authentic place for suburbanites to escape to and chase their dreams, so much so that Brooklyn's prices are now comparable with Manhattan. The current brownstoning of Brooklyn was put into hyperdrive by the pandemic, and we're seeing the predictable flow of gentrification run through the streets.
What's your connection to the city? Like, you're from here, right?
Yeah. So I'm from Queens.
This is Emily, artist,
So perfect because she said she wanted a dream.
creator,
Hi guys.
and New Yorker.
But I've been living in Brooklyn the past like 4 years, but my family is from Queens, like born and raised vibes. Yeah.
Naturally, I had to ask the question the world has yet to answer.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, which borough's the best? Yeah, it's time. Come on, borough on borough violence right now.
Okay. I am from Queens, so I must rep Queens. When I lived in Queens, I would think Queens was whack. I'm not gonna lie. But as I got older and I moved to Brooklyn, I found so much love in Queens. But with that being said, I like Brooklyn better. It really depends on the areas in each borough, because even though the boroughs do give some type of vibe, there's still individual areas. You're still gonna have the artsy part of Queens, the artsy part of Brooklyn. You're gonna have certain areas are definitely really diverse, but then there are certain areas that are very segregated still.
Yeah, because we've been staying in Midtown, and it's a ton of diversity that I compared to where I'm from. As soon as we got to Brooklyn, way more black people. As soon as we got out, I was like, damn, this is where it's at.
Okay, so when I first moved to Brooklyn, I moved to Brownsville. And to be honest, I was actually gonna move to Florida because I couldn't afford to live here. It was very expensive to live here. I'm on my own. I'm trying to be a creative.
Brownsville is a neighborhood in Brooklyn that's typically been regarded as ungentrifiable. And bear with me, this is my travel setup. But what does that mean? What is gentrification really? Gentrification is not a one-size-fits-all thing, and the reason why it happens is still being debated, and trust me, I know this is a very narrow scope. As John Fallon and Bruce London explored, gentrification is not just a physical thing, but a social one too. A working class is at the core of wealth production, as labor creates goods, and workers buying said goods floats the economy. So to ensure the multiplying of a working class is pretty important to those living in extreme luxury. And this happens in multiple different social relationships and institutions. First, you have the family. As we've explored, the ideal family is a suburban one, nuclear and privatized. Suburbia! How to beat the communists! A working husband and a stay-at-home wife responsible for maintaining the household and raising the kiddos. Then there are state-controlled institutions like schools or the media, which provide future and current workers with the skills needed to be good laborers, as well as shaping and providing understanding of their role in the system. The things that set cultural norms in society that benefit the ruling class. You remember that theory of cultural hegemony? Show up on time and commit 8 hours a day with a 30-minute lunch, listen to your teacher, and limit your bathroom breaks. Conveniently resembles a typical workday, huh? Watch Mr. Beast's philanthropy channel and internalize all the good he's doing is possible because of capitalism and benevolent wealthy people.
1 in 5 people in Costa Rica are homeless, which is why we are partnering with Techo to build 10 houses for 10 families in desperate need.
Crazy how the YouTube algorithm has pushed him to the top of the platform alongside all the copycat drones just biting his style. Third, in a daisy middle between the family and the state,
is community. Community is a tough one to nail down as it's so unique and based entirely on social and cultural norms in specific neighborhoods. But across the board, the community is where state institutions interact with the family. Local media, schools, etc., which may have started organically at the community level, are now governed at a broader scale that goes beyond local and at times can even be international. They therefore provide a pipeline into the community for ideals, values, and cultural norms that come from other places. For example, the Burlington Free Press. The local newspaper of Burlington, Vermont is owned by Gannett, which is a self-described marketing solutions company with unmatched reach at the national and local level. Their portfolio includes USA Today, which is included in multiple local newspaper outlets across 46 states, as well as NewsQuest, which operates 120 local media brands in the UK. At its core, the community is a collection of people, with only 1 in 5 households being a nuclear family. Actually, many households are in direct conflict with traditional patriarchal gender roles central to the ideal American family. Single parents, queer households, unmarried couples, multiple generations living in the same house all come together to create a community. Meaning communities are diverse, especially the ones in the city. These social ties are crucial for shaping the culture, lifestyle, and social support at the community level that is very hard for the state to control. This is where gentrification can be viewed as the monster it truly is. Gentrification is a form of violence and violent displacement because the community and the neighborhood are not the same. The community is social and mental, it can't be touched or bought, where the neighborhood is purely material, a product of the housing market, a commodity, a product that can be used to increase wealth, but it's where communities are born and cultivated. Gentrification displaces people from their neighborhoods and subsequently their communities and forces them to travel further from neighborhoods with support systems in place. What Neil Smith theorized in 1979, the working class and poor inheriting suburbia, is becoming a reality. I might as well be living in a dystopia because that is one of the worst possible outcomes imaginable. P.E. Moskowitz noted beautifully in their book How to Kill a City that
the suburbs were not built for poor people. Really, they were not built for anyone. They were built to reinvigorate capital, but they were especially not built for poor people, for people who rely on community, non-for-profit service providers, and public transportation. They were built for a life of secluded individuality.
Let's not forget that the car and the roads built for them have been used as an active weapon against black and brown communities. Like in New York, with city planners like Robert Moses, the controversial planner who was interested in elevating New York and destroying black, Puerto Rican, and poor communities in the process.
What was that neighborhood? It was a Puerto Rican slum. Do you remember it?
No, I don't remember.
Yeah, well, I lived on one of those streets there for a number of years, and I know exactly what it was like. It was the worst slum in New York. You wanted to leave it there, why? On a kind of neighborhood business? Well, Christ, you never could have been there.
Moses also built expressways that shat right through slums he deemed unfit. There's a religious metaphor in there. Moses shat a road right through the city for his chosen people. Interesting. Like the Cross Bronx Expressway, built through the Bronx, which displaced more than 1,500 families in the process.
It's easy to look through history and see the mistakes that should have been obvious, but we're still investing in a car-centric environment. This ever-expanding freeway in northern Utah is a necessity for those who work in or near Salt Lake City but can't afford property nearby. This means areas 40-plus minutes away that used to be middle to lower class are seeing massive spikes in prices right alongside the city's dense core. And yes, that means skyrocketing homelessness. Gentrification and the byproducts of the commodification of housing is a human rights issue. It's a climate issue. It's a global issue. The current answer for the housing crisis is more and more sprawl, longer commutes, and less community. Suburbia is more than a row of private homes. It's determined this nation's entire infrastructure. And even if it's a coincidence that it reinforces the ideals of capitalism, it's very intentional that the ones most impacted are marginalized communities. But I'm getting sidetracked. Why does gentrification happen?
I'm glad I asked. Profits. People Corporations and cities themselves want to make money. Who would have guessed?
Let me preface this by saying I don't mean to shame or criticize individuals operating normally within the housing market. Instead, we should begin to reimagine how we do housing and whether or not it should be a commodity in the first place. I do hope individuals will be more aware and considerate of communities they move into, but in a broken system, I want to focus on addressing said system and how to fix it. The most important, distinctive, and concerning characteristic to gentrification is the displacement of residents. This displacement may even be voluntary, as in response to rent increases, harassment, etc. If a working class family voluntarily moves, but a family of similar class can't move in, a pretty big sign of displacement. While this is typically paired with improvements in neighborhoods, that's not always even necessary. Once an area is in high demand, it'll see values go up whether or not investments are made in individual units. Those who initially reinvested into a property can be pushed out and replaced with new owners who simply maintain a property. Rents go up yearly, often with little to no improvements made in the unit. Now, in order for an area to fully gentrify, it needs to be profitable. I hope to illustrate that the process of gentrification is an inherent byproduct of the commodification of housing. Housing, while a necessity, is also an asset to be invested in. Even renters are investing in property, just not their own. This commodification of housing goes beyond the initial cost of the home and extends throughout its lifetime. Even after a house has succumbed to blight, the land it's on has value. Of course, affected by many factors like the land around it or if it's sitting on top of valuable materials like a pool of oil. This creates a secondhand housing market that gives rise to many different lucrative careers. Real estate agents, landlords, appraisers, Airbnb hosts, flippers, etc. A profit motive is typically behind decisions made when it comes to investing in property and infrastructure. A return on investment tends to be a priority when dealing with goods meant to be sold or assets to be invested in. It's why improvements to public infrastructure and new businesses moving into a city are often met with scrutiny from its inhabitants. Any development is a sign of drastic changes down the road. Cities, once they smell gentrification, or rather interest from wealthy citizens, tend to invest in areas that help them attract consumers and people from higher economic classes. People who will bring in more money, pay more taxes, and buy more goods. From a city's point of view, gentrification is a net positive. Mayor Bloomberg said this about billionaires moving to New York. "All I know is from the city's point of view, we want these people. And why criticize them? Wouldn't it be great if we could get all the Russian billionaires to move here?" His reasoning being, "They are the ones that pay a lot of the taxes. They're the ones that spend a lot of money in the stores and restaurants and create a big chunk of our economy." Which would be one thing if it was true. The wealthy of New York receive massive subsidies, such as the $600 million provided by the state of New York and $250 million from Erie County, totaling $850 million, the bulk of the cost for the Buffalo Bills Stadium, which cost $1.4 billion. Now, a football stadium sounds like a great investment for the area, but was $850 million of subsidies necessary to convince the owners to build the stadium in the state of New York? Where else are they going to build the Buffalo Bills Stadium? Texas? Second, while the state and the county front the bill, the ones enjoying the profits aren't really the citizens at all. Even if this did lead to the state investing sales tax revenue generated from the sales at the new stadium in disenfranchised neighborhoods, which it certainly will not, the main beneficiaries are the owners of the stadium. Government handouts make investing in your multi-billion-dollar business really a no-brainer, I guess. Wealthy people benefit from a plethora of tax breaks as well. From Bloomberg, in NYC, billionaires pay 1/100th the average property tax rate. The combined 89th and 90th floor penthouse at 157, a luxury skyrise on Billionaire Row, set the new high watermark for a single-family residence sale in New York. While the owner paid 9 figures for the penthouse, the city only taxed the unit for $17,000 in property taxes. New York's method for assessing the value of property and subsequently the percentage of property tax is a pretty messy process, even before you get to abatements and phase-ins. In that mess, the luxury high-rises raise a multitude of issues. I'll explain my main issue that stems from the current way of assessing the luxury condominiums quickly. Property in New York City is categorized in 4 classes. The first 2 classes are most relevant when talking about property taxes New Yorkers pay. Class 1, most residential property of up to 3 units and most condominiums that are not more than 3 stories. And Class 2, all other property that is not Class 1 and is primarily residential. Rentals, cooperatives, and condominiums. This includes the Billionaire Row units. To determine how much owners need to pay in taxes, the assessed value needs to be calculated. The assessed value is the amount used to calculate your property taxes. To find the assessed value, you need the market value, and there are 3 ways to determine market value. 2 are relevant for our purposes, and those go as follows. 1, base valuation on recent comparable sales of nearby property. This has many limitations, and the units on Billionaire Row, if valued this way, would raise the average property value for the nearby area and subsequently their taxes, which is a problem. And 2, the other way is the income capitalization method, to base value on a property's function or potential function as an income producing property. How much money can/will the property generate every month? Larger properties are often required to submit a real property income and expense statement, RPIE, explaining operations and net income. A property's own RPIEs are not the determining factor for its valuation and are instead adjusted and used in conjunction with other RPIEs to estimate values of similar Class 2 buildings. I know I'm indulging myself a bit, but this does matter. Class 1 is valued using the comparable sales method, and Class 2 is valued using the income capitalization method. This includes the luxury condos that remain empty, which dramatically outcost nearby properties. These condos weren't built to be rented, so assessors are left to create imaginary rental incomes based on comparable units. The issue is, nothing in the city is comparable to the new constructions built on Billionaire Row.
The penthouse there of 220 Central Park South, that building, just sold to the owner of the Brooklyn Nets and one of the founders of Alibaba, I think, Josiah, for $200 million. And by the time you watch this, I will have listed the penthouse of Central Park Tower, the highest residential home on the planet, for $250 million. So $45 million, it's like $45, right?
This is a graph of the market value of New York's most expensive apartments compared to their sales price. As you can see, the market value of these properties are far lower than their actual cost, meaning their assessed value is far lower than they really should be, meaning the owners of New York's most expensive units aren't paying nearly as much in taxes as they should be. This is a perfect example of a system that has yet to adjust for the wealth of global elites, where the world's richest people conveniently benefit from the city's passivity. Now, for anyone who wants to hand free money to the ultra-rich, you might be surprised. Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men in the country, and his rich pals agree with me, saying, and I quote, "Our leaders have asked for shared sacrifice, but when they did the asking, they spared me. I checked with my mega-rich friends to learn what pain they were expecting. They, too, were left untouched. While the poor and middle class fight for us in Afghanistan, and while most Americans struggle to make ends meet, we mega-rich continue to get our extraordinary tax breaks." He goes on to say, "My friends and I have been coddled long enough by a billionaire-friendly Congress. It's time for our government to get serious about shared sacrifice." Now, I'm not a fan of sympathetic billionaires, and I do think billionaires are themselves a policy failure. And a fluff piece from a billionaire begging to be taxed more while conveniently not being properly taxed doesn't do much for me, especially as a company he owns is underpaying and overworking railroad employees. I think Warren Buffett is an ass, for lack of a better word. I'm just letting you all know I'm biased here. I don't particularly like owners who directly exploit their employees and make billions doing it. Still, he is asking for higher taxes levied on the rich, so the Elon Musk fans who by some divine act that are still watching can take it up with him. Gentrification, being a function of the housing market, can at times be predictable. Philip Clay, an urban studies professor, broke gentrification down into 4 phases in his book, Neighborhood Renewal. Phase 1. Individuals fix up properties in a neighborhood through sweat equity and private capital, as banks are unlikely to loan mortgage money to the area. This first phase is small and spearheaded by individuals seeking a cheap place to start a life for themselves, and results in little displacement as most property is vacant. Clay observed this group is often made up of artists with skill to repair property, and also gay people with taste in search of a place to live freely. Phase 2. More of the same people move in. Displacement, while still minimal, starts as vacancies go down. Small speculators like landlords and flippers may begin to acquire and renovate property for resale or rent. Renovation spreads to nearby blocks and property is still relatively cheap. Banks are still unlikely to lend money, especially without security. Phase 3. The neighborhood attracts official interest. Cities may begin urban renewal and or small developers may move in. Physical improvements become obvious and prices rise quickly. Displacement continues and may rise if codes are enforced, resulting in fines which can be as high as $100 per day, or if an area is reassessed, raising property taxes for homes that haven't seen any improvements. Landlords can raise prices as the area sees more demand, and if the property is reassessed, will likely offload the higher cost onto their tenants. Banks begin loaning money for homes in the area, and the newcomers start getting involved in the community. often promoting it to other would-be middle-class gentrifiers, and opposing things like subsidized public housing. In this phase, the neighborhood is perceived as palatable for middle-class professionals. Phase 4. Gentrification gentrifies. People from the business and managerial middle class begin to move in. Rental units available grow, helping to broaden the income range of those in the middle class. Prices increase with demand. Rents also increase with rising property prices and inflation as well. Displacement goes crazy, and gentrification spills into nearby communities. These phases don't always happen or happen in perfect order, nor do they need to for an area to gentrify. Clay also noted this summary of gentrification was not the end of the story. Gentrification is really just the market profiting from undervalued housing until said housing is no longer undervalued. In some markets, there is artificial demand created by purposely withholding supply, or lying about a 24-hour sale that will actually never end. The housing shortage is a bit more honest. It's actually crazy how on point Monopoly is when it comes to the monopolization of the housing market. Except when you lose the game in real life, you typically lose everything. I should say, this isn't me explicitly calling for the abolition of private property. Just trying to understand and explain the way the privatization of housing paired with such a profitable housing market inevitably leads to housing shortages and displacement. A housing shortage really only affects those with insufficient capital to barter. Billionaires and corporations with more money than they know what to do with can always acquire property with a high enough budget, especially when they receive subsidies from a city. Because of the privatization of property, and the biggest barrier to acquiring a property being the cost, people and corporations with access to capital can own multiple properties and keep said properties empty, as we see in units throughout cities. Thus, the housing supply is limited, and new developments typically are built for middle to upper class individuals, as it makes the most sense to build for higher income people and to let the working class and poor inherit the older models. While this doesn't make much sense on its face, when you factor in inflation, the cost of housing outpacing inflation, and stagnant wages, most middle to upper class homeowners, like everybody else, want to profit on the sale of their home when they do sell. So the working class and poor are never likely to inherit the properties the middle and upper classes leave for newer or bigger homes. Complicating the process further is the fact that the secondhand real estate market isn't a market between homeowners. Other players like landlords and flippers, both individual and corporate, influence the market and eat at the supply. Short-term rental companies like Airbnb have added to housing markets in cities all around America, seeing large spikes in prices. It's become a large enough issue that cities like Burlington are putting massive restrictions on short-term rentals. Due to limited supply and the ability to increase profits from said property from short-term rental sites or increasing demand, for those hoping to see cash flow from the asset, investing more is still a profitable decision. Homeowners who plan to live in homes can't justify investing as much in the inflated stock of houses because A, they're not going to be generating income from the property, and B, they don't have nearly as much capital to invest in the property. Thus, the housing market is not just a market of homeowners, but filled with real estate investors who often buy homes before they even hit the market, with wholesalers pressuring homeowners to sell their home under market value. As stated earlier, the main issue with gentrification is displacement. If residents can ride with gentrification, they'll experience all the benefits associated with the upscaling of a neighborhood. But for how long can residents, especially those from the working class, hold on? Unless action is taken by cities to ensure affordable housing, gentrification in places like New York and San Francisco will only continue to disrupt communities. The thing is, most people sooner or later feel the strain of gentrification. Moskowitz equated gentrification to a ladder, with different classes making up its rungs. As gentrification progresses, middle to upper class people start to move down the ladder and also feel the pressure of gentrification. It's crazy, independent landlords and flippers also feel the squeeze as their housing market, once flooded with undervalued property, is infiltrated by corporations with larger budgets. Of course, landlords in particular benefit if they can afford to keep up with the improvements of nearby housing, as they can increase rents and even rent below market norms and still cash out. Flippers and landlords alike can also move shop and head to a housing market that's undervalued where big money has yet to take interest in. This of course is not infinite, as we are already dealing with a housing crisis. At some point, middle class people, inspired by an episode of Flip It, will be barred from flipping houses completely, and it will be left to those with millions to spare.
With more and more money needing places to grow, gentrification is spreading across America to places most never would have even considered at risk of gentrification a decade ago.
So they're basically gentrifying mobile home parks.
That's a great way to put it.
As time has shown, phases are missing from Clay's process, as Moskowitz pointed out. In the case of cities like New York, global players are turning the city into a vault to store capital, luxury commodities for the world's elite. pushing property out of reach for even the people at the top of the middle class, which would be phase 5. While happening mainly in America's most popular cities, nothing is stopping wealthy people from around the globe to start buying and hoarding property in suburbs and cities all around America's Sunbelt and Midwest. Actually, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but that's already happening. Yeah, this American dream everyone talks about is actually a bit of a nightmare. Since 2010, billions of dollars from Wall Street are poured into the single-family housing market. Wall Street caused a housing crisis, was bailed out, and then cashed in on all the properties in foreclosure. I won't get into that because this video is getting long enough already, but it is quite upsetting. The new big players in the market are iBuyers. iBuyers, short for instant buyers, are companies that use technology to make an offer on your home instantly. These companies often buy homes that never hit the market. Open Door, one of the biggest iBuyers, has a pro tip for listing agents. Request an offer before you list on the MLS for a more competitive price. No competition equals more competitive price. That makes sense, actually. These iBuyers are then selling some of those homes directly to corporate landlords. This is bad for nearly everyone. Real estate agents, wholesalers, flippers, individual landlords, and especially homeowners. But hey, what are you gonna do? Have the government restrict iBuyers? Restrict business? Where will that end? They restrict iBuyers, then it's the landlords, then they're investing in public housing. A program that's currently underfunded with wait times over a decade long, if applications are still being accepted. No, the thing to be done is to get everyone to work harder. You see, the real issue is that everyone is just too lazy. Here's a bright idea. Why don't you go out and create your own $1 million corporation and become the landlord? Huh? That's the solution right there. I solved America's housing crisis. But seriously, investing in affordable housing would be great, but the culture needs to stop stigmatizing public housing and those on it. Also, the culture needs to realize that government helping to provide housing isn't always the worst thing on the planet. And besides, they do it for homeowners. Along with government-backed mortgage programs, every homeowner may deduct mortgage interest from their gross income on their first and second homes. Homeowners do get benefits, but it's becoming harder and harder to acquire a home, and that leaves you with renting, where you pay for every expense your landlord has. I love this system. There's another missing phase to Clay's process. Phase 0. A city which has been properly maintained and invested in is going to be more expensive to develop in, especially with the city having less incentive to hand out huge subsidies. Many factors can lead to a city falling into disrepair. Lacking sufficient federal aid, natural disasters, citizens leaving, and sources of employment dissipating. For a multitude of cities, white flight and the unethical practice of blockbusting had a direct hand in their loss of value. Black people barred from FHA mortgages were forced to buy property through contract sales. That didn't let them build equity. Late payments could mean the loss of the home completely, and they'd get ownership of the property only after 15 to 20 years of on-time monthly payments. Black buyers, desperate to acquire property, with most property being race restricted, homes were often sold at inflated prices, leading to anyone in the house able to work forced to work full-time, leaving no time to take care of the property nor raise their children. Owners also subdivided their property and rented to other black families, and because of overcrowding, schools were running half days. These conditions in part led to a rise in gangs. Oh god, does this connect to the war on drugs? Does this connect on hey, I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Not this video. Maybe the next one, but not this one. While the city fell into disrepair, white middle-class people were lured into the suburbs with FHA loans to subsidize their evacuation, meaning those left in cities were at one point mainly black, brown, and immigrants, people whose needs society typically doesn't prioritize.
Using Neil Smith's rent gap theory, the more disenfranchised an area is, the more ripe it is for gentrification. The difference between the current worth of a property and how much it could potentially be worth is a huge indicator for where gentrification is going to strike. Included in that is the need for demand for an area at the neighborhood level. Building a mansion in a field in the middle of the North Pole isn't going to make anyone much money, but a one bed, one bath in Brooklyn is going for $3,700.
We can see the first areas to gentrify have been the areas that have higher levels of things that tend to lead to higher quality of life, paired with low prices. Like in New York, with its high levels of walkability, diversity, activities, culture, employment, mixed with, at one point, low prices. As reported by the New York Times in 1972, the median rent for Queens was $123, about $910 today. The median rent in Queens now is estimated to be about $2,500. Or San Francisco, with its high levels of walkability, beautiful architecture, amazing climate, culture, employment, and at one point, low prices.
Speculation in housing is changing the face of the city. Rapid and repeated turnovers of residential property are driving up rents, and many San Franciscans find they can't afford to live in their own neighborhoods.
While at this point in time, I don't believe there's evidence that supports a countrywide conspiracy to disinvest in cities to create the conditions necessary for gentrification, and frankly, I doubt anyone would have the foresight to know Americans would at some point want to return to parts of cities left to fall into disarray. But the creation of ghettos created areas that are perfect for the city to bulldoze through or slowly gentrify. Housing is where a lot of people and corporations make and store money that is then protected from inflation. Cities become even better places for corporations to invest money when the city subsidizes investments. Much like suburbia was funded by the state, gentrification is accelerated by the city, typically in the form of subsidies. Dan Gilbert, tech companies, and real estate developers. While some of these subsidies come with affordable housing requirements, affordable housing can still be fairly expensive. Affordable housing in New York City, for what they classify an extremely low-income person, an individual making $28,020 a year, starts at $700 for a one-person studio. What the fuck? All this to say that the idea that Brownsville is somehow ungentrifiable stems from the idea that conditions in Brownsville are so bad there is no way to make investing in the neighborhood worth anyone's time. The current conditions in Brownsville prove once again cities only care about the condition of their neighborhood and quality of life for their residents if there is profit to be made. Well, some might say nothing is free and cities need to invest in areas that promise a return. It's hard to justify that while suburbs all around America were built with government subsidies. Suburban homeowners are the single biggest recipient of housing subsidies, while suburbia generates little money outside of property taxes and is instead just a massive sunk cost as street and other maintenance costs occur over time. It's easy to blame suburbanites or college kids for gentrification, and they do play a role, at least in the US. In New York City, NYU, and other higher education institutions, student housing and off-campus students eat at the supply of housing available in the city. And in a city like Burlington, the local colleges provide a constant stream of young people with access to cash who can pay the yearly rent raises. Still, at the end of the day, the main actors are real estate developers and the city itself. Again, none of this is meant as an attack on middle-class people or college students moving to the city. I want to live there myself. Don't worry, in this economic climate, it's definitely not happening anytime soon. Besides, cities all around America want to attract the creative class, a term created and popularized by Richard Florida, a university professor and best-selling author of The Rise of the Creative Class. Defined by Florida as people in science and engineering, architecture and design, education, arts, music, and entertainment, whose economic function is to create new ideas, new technology, and new creative content. He told cities in order to prosper, they should develop intentionally catering to them.
And the third commandment, which is our kind of dirty little secret of economic development, is the way you get the jobs and find the companies is you hand over a gigantic bribe. You pile up money as high as you can in the forms of tax abatement and financial incentives and infrastructure improvement, and you hand it over to the company, and that's called, in most communities, economic development. Why was Lycos moving to Boston? Boston offered nothing in the way of financial or tax abatement. They weren't building any great new infrastructure. They were moving to Boston to get access, in their words, to a large and critical mass of talented, highly educated, skilled, and creative people. Maybe the question isn't how to encourage or incentivize companies to locate. Maybe the really deep question in economic growth is why do we, people, choose the places we do to live and work? You need to have a thriving group of entrepreneurial talent that can take that technology and be creative with it economically and turn it into companies. But you also need artistic and aesthetic and design creativity and civic and political creativity. And when all those forms of creativity come together in a place for any particular reason whatsoever, that place begins to grow propulsively.
Unfortunately, in order to make room for those the city wants,
it first needs to get rid of those it already has. If you look at gentrifying cities, it feels almost as if they're just waiting for their perfect moment to gentrify. Look at New Orleans after Katrina.
The neighborhood is a different neighborhood now. It's not the real 6th Ward no more. All these people coming buying all the property up. It changes like almost a gated community.
Detroit after years and years of neglect.
Keenan, quite plainly, people think that the city needs this money more than Dan Gilbert does. And he's already gotten about $200 million in government incentives for this 48-story skyscraper. It's a tall building with a high price, and some Detroiters think they have way too much to lose.
Or Brooklyn after COVID.
It's such a big story. It's hard to like condense it because also like when I first moved there, it was before the pandemic. Then the pandemic happened. A lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people were inside, and the crime went up a lot. Like, there was shootings all the time. Like, I used to have, like, the Citizen app, and it alerts you when there's crime near you, and I had to turn it off because, like, I didn't want to see it anymore. Because it was like, I have to live here. I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't want to keep looking at this. Like, let me just, like, ignore it and just get used to it. I kind of had the mentality of, like, if I don't bother anybody, nobody's gonna bother me. Like, that's just like how I was like taught, that's how I was raised. My dad would teach me that. So I wasn't like scared or anything, but to have like so many people move there when the crime is going up and like gentrifying, it's just like really crazy to watch all of that. Like to see it all unfold.
What did that look like?
Oh my God, literally just like apartment buildings being built. As soon as you saw them, like the certain types of architecture that they would put, and first of all, it's all ugly. Yeah. Like it's all ugly. I remember like I had a rooftop, so like I could see like the really nice view, and it was still beautiful. There's like brownstones, it's like super nice. And then they built this building that was bright orange and bright blue, and I just like immediately got annoyed.
This is the building in question. So this is the Days Inn, or it will be. Planned opening in September with prices starting at $132 a night. There's also an 11-space parking lot to go with it. While seeing a hotel on the edge of Ocean Hill and Brownsville means that someone with cash sees life in this part of Brooklyn, and the business will hopefully bring in revenue for this area, it begs the question whether or not the city subsidized this new construction. And if so, if the city plans to use the revenue generated to address the blight within the borough those who live there deal with on a daily basis. Or better yet, investing in trade schools or community programs and directly empowering those from the borough. But another question, what does a hotel represent? Access.
It's like I've been seeing like this connection between like that cultural appropriation and like that kind of mindset and gentrification, you know?
People transplant here and then they like want to be very like New York culturally, fashion-wise, this and that. They want to get a bacon, egg, and cheese, whatever. But then it kind of starts becoming like appropriation of like culture and fashion, because like the whole like the clean girl aesthetic, like I don't know if you're familiar, but like basically it's like the slick hair, like lip gloss and hoops, and they're saying like Bella Hadid, Kendall Jenner, blah 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 did this. No, this is like from us. This is from like women of color going to the beauty supply stores with their moms and getting their $1 lip gloss, their hoops, and then slicking their hair because our hair is a mess in the morning and like it's hard to get ready for school. You slick it back. It's just crazy to me how people can just repackage things. Like I was watching this, I think it was a TikTok, and it's weird because like some people do like come here and they experience New York in a way where it feels like they're taking. Like, as I said, like kind of the clean girl thing. It didn't originate like New York, but like people of color, women of color, basically.
And that's like a tale as old as time too.
Yeah, like the jewelry. Oh yeah, I purposely wore this jewelry today.
Yeah.
Because this is like my baby nameplate. So this is like culturally like so New York. Like you get a nameplate when you're a baby and you keep it.
You had that since you were...
Yeah.
Damn, okay.
Yeah, this is from a baby and also this one. Wait, this one with the two. My guardian angel and cross.
Damn, that's so nice.
I wanted to wear it on purpose because like I do feel like this is like very me and very New York. And like, as I said, people come here and they get the nameplate and they're like, I'm not gentrifying. I'm part of it. I'm part of it.
I'm here this whole time.
Yeah. Oh, but back to what I was saying about the TikTok. I saw this guy, white guy, come here and go to like all the bodegas. And he was like, look at this. It's amazing. And like, you know, I appreciate that. I like to see that because you're seeing what we have and you're like, wow, this is cool. But then there's other people who move to New York and I see TikToks of them being like, we need to stop glamorizing New York because it's so dirty. So leave, go home.
Yeah.
Like, I'm confused.
And that's where like the nuance of it too is really, because I think there's
a line.
Yeah,
It's delicate.
Because you see people over glamorizing New York and only focusing on like the very like high end aesthetic.
Oh my god, yeah.
And then you see other people, and I think like what you were just saying with like them demonizing New York and like the parts of it that make New York, it's like, now there's a balance here somewhere.
While the commodification of housing and the gentrification process is the fault of capitalism and profit-seeking corporation, landlords couldn't raise rents without people with more money willing to pay them. And those moving into gentrifying neighborhoods could prioritize and acknowledge the culture and community that's already there. Get to know your neighbors, learn the norms, fight for affordable housing, and fight against legislation that displaces those in the community that you're trying to be a part of. There is a right and wrong way to experience culture. And the same goes with cities.
Kind of insidious to me is like the way this city kind of prioritizes catering to like wealthy millennials, and like how they put a lot of money and resources into like building and developing a space for them to come in, instead of like trying to actually heal and invest in things that can actually help.
100%.
Like what you were saying.
And I even noticed, like, I don't know, you guys have been taking the train and traveling and stuff, but if you ever notice, like, some train stations are really nice and it's in like the nice areas, like the wealthy areas, and then some train stations suck. It sucks because even in the train stations, they can make this train station nice. They don't have to spend so much money on this other train station. But it's like, you're so blatantly making everybody feel like they're worse. Because if you're, like, where I lived in Brownsville, I was on the C line. All the trains are old. Like, they're literally old where they don't even have, like, the thing that tells you where you are. Like, it has, like, the little lights. It doesn't have that automatic thing. There's no air conditioning. It's dark. And it's like, you live there, you take that train every single day, and it kind of just makes you feel like that's what you deserve. And then you go somewhere nice and they have a nice train station, and that's what they deserve.
Through this planning, they're telling their citizens like, oh, you're worse or you're better.
Even the streets, like driving in Brownsville, there would be huge holes in the street. Humongous holes that, like, to the point where, like, I've never even done this, but I wanted to call somebody and be like, hello, can you fix this hole? Like, even your surroundings, it can make you feel like shit. Like, it can make you feel like you don't deserve better. Because you're not getting better.
What if ideologies and cultural norms aren't just instilled through the media or through laws, but through the basic infrastructure of everyday life? What would that look like? Now, Reagan, with his economic theory, Reaganomics, and the subsequent rise of neoliberalism, are to blame for cities' lack of funding. Reagan cut non-military spending by 9.7% in his first term, and in his second, he cut the Department of Housing and Urban Development's budget by 40%. But to think that Reagan wasn't acting with the consent of the silent majority and the other white folks is ridiculous. The egghead won 2 terms. While gentrification is a broader phenomenon that was taking place before Reagan, cities lacking sufficient federal funding has made gentrification the only option for a city's revival. Now, it's not like everybody was in love with this guy's policy either. The guy got shot, and politicians like Mayor Bernie Sanders back when he was mayor of Burlington were pushing back against his economic policies.
If I seem a little bit depressed, I am, because I just came back from Washington. And actually, Ronald Reagan is the President of the United States.
Just a glass of wine with dinner. Just a glass or two to relax. Just a sip of wine to melt the stress away. Oh, it's so good for your health. No, you can't be an alcoholic if you know how to hold the glass. If you can swirl the wine around in the glass and inside of your mouth. No, you can't have a drinking problem if you look for the legs of the wine. If you can smell the bouquet and aroma and know how to take your sweet time.
I found my old sketchbook. I suck ass at drawing, but over time you can see I found a style. And a weird fascination with eyes. I gotta show my therapist these. And you can see similar growth on the channel as well. Years ago, I decided to just pick up a camera. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but I just started making stuff. It's not been easy. I think the most difficult part is uploading videos over and over again to an audience of no one. And it's even more nerve-wracking, actually, knowing there's people on the other side watching the shit I make. Like, wow, responsibility. But I had to ask myself what I wanted, and if it was worth the work. Something I'm still trying to decide. One thing Suburbia shows is the government's ability to act. Like Ice Cube, you wouldn't believe that till you saw it. Its ability to influence people with a silent hand. When capitalism was exclusionary to the point most white people were suffering, the government created the conditions for more people to enjoy the fruits of other people's labor. The privatized and business-like aspect of purchasing and maintaining a home was intentional. Moving people further and further from cities was intentional. Segregation was intentional. The destruction of slums and displacement of minorities was intentional. Again, look at the policies, agencies, and constructions and their effect. Suburbia is functioning as intended. A push towards walkable and affordable cities is fundamentally challenging the basic structure America was built on. Don't get it twisted. Zoom out and see the romanticized walkable cities all around Europe are unaffordable and facing their own unique gentrification problems. Every time you see a tented community in a city, the commodification of housing working as intended. The housing crisis means millions for some. Nothing like working in an industry where your product is a basic necessity to just surviving.
Katie Speets and Paul Cushman are desperate.
Bag alert, major bag alert.
Fuck me. With the benefits of hindsight, working towards cities built for everyone is what's needed. Yes, even the bikers. Seriously, everyone needs to be part of this conversation, as conversations about walkability get ableist pretty fast. People with physical disabilities can benefit from cars, especially as it stands, walkable cities aren't nearly as accessible as they need to be. Hot takes all around, people. Take it while it's hot. Conversations about current walkable cities tend to leave out the fact that communities of people already live there. In the US of A, those communities are often disenfranchised, dealing with housing shortages and rising rents. As we've explored, remember, gentrification, it's happening, and it is important. The difference between now and the New Deal era is that after FDR and before Reagan, the government's perceived role was to ensure the conditions necessary for a prosperous life.
for those it deemed worthy. Now we face two obstacles: a government which seems uninterested in the needs of its people, and climate change, split on whether or not climate change is even real. Hell, one side can't even respect the perceived democracy of an election. Second, the fact we have so much sprawl, and the culture is realizing just how nice walkability is, while housing is still a commodity. To dog on suburbia and romanticize walkable cities without being critical of the displacement of those native to walkable communities is wild.
It's natural to chase the easy fix, to leave your car-dependent sprawl in search of a dense, walkable city with like-minded people. But more often than not, the easy fix isn't the right fix. The reason suburbia is so uninviting and environmentally devastating goes deeper than it being car-dependent, deeper than its restrictive zoning laws, deeper than its backwards HOAs. There's a fixation on consumerism and a culture of isolation and individualism that's cultivated in the suburbs. And it's only when people have tackled that and worked on their communities that change has happened. Reimagining suburbia and rethinking the suburbs being built around the country is the first step, and there is a lot of discourse about changing zoning laws and allowing ideal cities to blossom from what is currently hellish sprawl. Suburbs around the country are imagining what suburban living means. They're taking down their fences and building community centers. Look at North Street Co-Housing, a suburb in California that has torn down their fences and built a community center. Before we change the zoning laws and allow businesses and lower class people to move next to upper class suburbanites, we need to change the culture and realize us as individuals have the power to be part of the change we want to see. We can't expect other people to do the things that need doing and to reimagine the world we all live in. We need to get involved and go raise hell at city council meetings. I've been working on this video for months because it's so important and I can't get it out of my head. So many different issues and movements meet in the city. Do you want to stop homelessness or put an end to gentrification? Do you want to maybe save the climate? Or maybe you just want to be able to walk to a fucking local business. This isn't about virtue signaling or some bullshit like that. It's literally just about saving the environment and creating cities people are happier in. This is local action. It's showing up and creating communities and a sense of belonging. It literally aligns with everything. The white liberals are on board for helping out with this one, and you know that's when shit gets serious. Capitalism has claimed for so long that the market will reflect what people want, but the people are sick of car-dependent sprawl. Literally. Who knows? Maybe capitalism is doomed, dying, or dead. Elon Musk, please save it.
Hi, you made it to the end of my video. Thank you so much for watching. I just wanted to say if you like this video, it took me a long time to make, a ton of money that I don't really have. But so yeah, if you like this video and want to support the channel, consider checking out the Patreon. I hate to ask, but you know, it is what it is. There will be extra content up there, maybe. It's pretty much just if you want to support me in making videos like this. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching. And also, I decided to come here because they're still building suburbia all over the place. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a freeway or a highway or something. And you can see the row of new constructions there. It's just crazy. Thought it was interesting. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye.